Hello and welcome to The Game Changers, the podcast that celebrates trailblazing women in sport. I'm Sue Anstiss, and I'd like to start with a big thank you to our partners Sport England, who support The Game Changers through a National Lottery Award. I'm delighted to say that this, the 13th season of the podcast, is a serialisation of my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. Chapter 6, Show Me the Money. Sponsors and brands are looking at women's sport with new eyes. They're looking at what they can get from women's sport from the story and the purpose. Ultimately, it's about what it says about them as a brand. Lisa Parfit, co-founder, The Space Between. I started my career in sports sponsorship, working for Gatorade, the US sports drink. Our goal at the time was to build the authenticity and credibility of the brand in sport ahead of a planned UK launch in 1992. We seeded the product into a range of sports and high-profile teams, establishing partnerships and increasing the visibility of elite athletes drinking the product. Looking back, it shocks me to see that, despite the fact that almost all the work we did was in men's sport, I never saw this as an issue. I do not remember ever really thinking about it or questioning it. Apart from some work across Europe in more gender-balanced sports like athletics, triathlon and tennis, the majority of the deals we negotiated were for male team sports, including the England football team, England and Scotland rugby, England cricket, England basketball, the British Basketball League, and Premier League teams including Arsenal, Leeds and, at the time, Nottingham Forest. Promotion for the brand included one of my all-time favourite TV ads, Be Like Mike. But watching the fantastic Gatorade athlete Michael Jordan in the Netflix documentary series The Last Dance in 2020, I was struck by the absence of females in the world of the Chicago Bulls. No female players, no coaches, administrators, and very few female journalists. My highlighting this is not to call out Gatorade, who were clearly focused on building presence with the biggest sports at the time, and have gone on to back many female athletes, teams, and campaigns since the 1990s, but more to highlight how much things have altered in my own awareness and perception. As the years have passed, my filter for equality has significantly changed through the work I have done in women's sport. I look back and think, how could I not have seen or questioned that at the time? I imagine that is still the case for many people working in sports marketing today. It's been easy to stick with the high-profile sports and names, and that's meant that men's sport continues to receive the most investment. Throughout the history of sports sponsorship in the past 50 years, deals have mainly been negotiated by senior managers in sports and corporate organisations, and in both cases, these were predominantly men. Both tended to be influenced by male beliefs and networks, which has meant that sponsorship deals are often skewed that way too. According to research in this area, there are 3 interlinking reasons for the historical lack of sponsorship in women's sport. First, decisions have been made based on the potential financial outcomes of a deal, which often include networking opportunities. In many cases, those making the decisions, usually men, see men's sport as the best place to socialise and entertain their usually male customers in hospitality boxes. Second, media coverage and the metrics of exposure are often cited as a major reason for sports sponsorship. Because men's sport has always received substantially more media coverage, those making sponsorship deals believe men's sport will always give greater exposure, albeit at a higher cost than the women's equivalent in many cases. Finally, previous trends often influence sponsorship decisions. Sports sponsorship can be an expensive investment with no guarantee of success, so those making the decisions want to justify their decisions based on what competitors have done before them. If brands A, B, and C have signed sponsorship deals with Premiership rugby teams and seem to be getting good exposure in hospitality, it's much easier for a marketing manager to follow suit and sign a deal with another men's team rather than invest in a women's team or league, which might be as yet unproven. All that said, it is fantastic to see that investment in women's sports sponsorship is on the rise. From 2013 to 2017, there was a 47% increase in the number of deals being done and a 38% increase in the average deal size. That was before the huge deals that followed in 2018 to 2020. In 2018, UEFA announced a $28 million partnership with credit card firm Visa, the first standalone sponsor for the women's game in a deal that runs until 2025. The FIFA Women's World Cup in France in 2019 saw 6 unique event partners compared to 3 for the previous tournament in Canada, generating an estimated $12.76 million. In 2019, it was announced that the prize money offered in the inaugural Shiseido Women's Tennis Association finals in Shenzhen would be $14 million, doubling the previous $7 million. This means the WTA's tour prize money has increased 90% in the last decade. Winner Ashley Barty earned $4.42 million in prize money, significantly more than the winner of the male equivalent ATP Tour final, Stefanos Tsitsipas, who won $2.87 million in 2019. Women's sport in the UK currently generates approximately £350 million per year in revenue. Over half of this is from 2 sports, football and tennis. According to research from 2 Circles and the Women's Sport Trust, by increasing and driving fan interest in women's sport, this annual revenue could increase to £1 billion in the next decade, an increase of over 200%. Despite much of women's sport being invisible during 2020, at the end of that year, Izzy Ray, a consultant in Deloitte's Sports Business Group, told The Telegraph that her company predicted 21-22 could be the breakaway season for women's sports. They anticipated revenues could top $1 billion as audiences reach record highs and significant increases in brand sponsorship agreements and TV rights deals lead to an increased demand for women's sport. Prior to COVID-19, matchday audiences, TV viewing figures, and fan bases for women's sports had been building at a phenomenal pace. As social distancing measures lift, pent-up demand for live sporting events will collide with the growing fan base for women's sports. Brands have a significant opportunity to seize the moment to explore new opportunities in the market, which have the potential to bring immense value, not only in monetary terms, but also as a signal for their support of gender parity. Brands are now choosing to sponsor women's sport not because it is the right thing to do, but because they are seeing the power of women's sport to engage the public and drive sales. Research from Nielsen in 2018 showed that women's sports are seen as more progressive, less money-driven, more family-oriented, and cleaner than men's sports. Women also see women's sports as a lot more inspiring than men's. The Nielsen research also showed that 84% of general sports fans have an interest in women's sport, and of those, 51% are male. It is clear that women are interested in watching women's sport, but women's sports also represent a major opportunity to engage male fans. Heather Rabatz founded the Women's Sports Group, which renegotiated the Women's Super League broadcast deal on behalf of the FA. She told me some of the values around women's football, that sense of collaboration, that sense of professionalism and passion, but not tribalism, are very attractive to brands and broadcasters. It's exciting for any sponsor or broadcaster supporting women's sport as they're getting involved in a sport that's growing and moving forward. That offers some real opportunities in terms of their own return on investment. Commenting on the change in attitude towards sponsorship of women's sport, the FA's Kelly Simmons said, "We are seeing two things when we talk to brands. One, that they don't want to be in a men-only space, and secondly, they want community activation and engagement as opposed to traditional badging and eyeballs. Things have very much changed." In the UK, women's team sport has attracted big brands in recent years, with Barclays announcing the biggest ever sponsorship of women's football in this country in 2019, when they became title sponsor of the WSL. The deal, worth £10 million over 3 years, also sees Barclays supporting the FA Girls Football School partnerships. This support enables the Youth Sport Trust and the FA to create strategic partnerships with families of schools that are committed to the growth and development of girls' football, with the ambition that all girls will be able to play football in schools by 2024. I asked Kelly Simmons why she thought we were seeing this growth in sponsorship deals for women's football. A range of reasons: changes in society, changes in sports sponsorship, and changes in what brands want. If you look at society, there is a greater challenge on everybody, including brands, to be inclusive and diverse and support women. That whole movement has helped change the environment. You also have seen a change in sponsorship and sports sponsorship, with brands wanting to demonstrate a better purpose, a wider purpose, and wanting to put back into society. How companies are viewed by their staff and customers is always important, as Kelly explains. Barclays were really keen to be seen internally as an inclusive and diverse employer, and, therefore, reviewing their sponsorship portfolio and having been a big investor and supporter in the Men's Premier League, it made absolute sense that as part of that portfolio, they would support the top of the women's game too. One of the first big brands to sponsor women's sport in the UK was Kia in 2014, when the car manufacturer announced the first stand-alone sponsorship deal for women's cricket. The announcement was a huge boost for the newly professional England women's squad and demonstrated that women's cricket and women's sport more generally was a viable commercial option for big brands. Talking to Sue Mott in 2017, President and CEO of Kia Motors UK, Paul Philpott, explained why the decision made absolute business sense. Women are pretty influential in the car buying process. Around 55% of our drivers are women, and I've seen studies that estimate 88% of car purchases are influenced by women. That was the spur, the catalyst for us. It made sense. Women are a powerfully influential consumer base. Women are brilliant sporting heroes. We looked at the England women's cricket team, then led by Charlotte Edwards and subsequently by Heather Knight. They had talent, capability, skill, and the commitment to take themselves to number one in the world. There weren't many teams in the country, men or women, who could say that. The opportunity to be associated with such success and with a challenger brand themselves was a great opportunity for Kia. In fact, it's estimated that women drive 70 to 80% of all consumer purchasing through a combination of their own buying power and influence. Even when a woman is not paying for something directly herself, she's often the influence or veto vote behind someone else's purchase, be that a partner, child, or elderly parent. With this in mind, it's extraordinary, really, that more brands haven't thrown themselves behind women's sport. Paul Philpott goes on to identify another key advantage of women's sport. Kia were a challenger brand back in 2014, still looking for something different to give us a disproportionate return on our investment. Ultimately, brands are looking at what they invest and the return they will get for that financial investment. Women's sport is at a point where it offers incredible value to brands, the opportunity to associate with a sporting property that would be multiple times more expensive for the male equivalent. Brands also find that access to athletes is so much better with women's sport. At a human level, working with the athletes is such a pleasure, says Philpott. If we were to sponsor a major Premiership football team, we wouldn't have access to the players, we wouldn't have access to the management, we'd just be an asset. Whereas the beauty of our association with England women's cricket is that they are known to us. They're individuals, they're people. We feel how passionate they are and how much they appreciate our sponsorship. It's a two-way relationship. Other brands that have been real trailblazers for women's sport include Ricoh, who sponsored the Women's British Golf Open for 12 years before title sponsorship was taken up by AIG in a new 5-year deal launched in 2019, and SSE, whose landmark moment in the history of women's football saw the energy brand in the first ever major sponsorship of the Women's FA Cup competition. Reflecting on that deal, Lisa Parfitt, co-founder of sports marketing agency The Space Between, says it really was ahead of its time. You had a client and a brand who were willing to overlook the media value and broadcast minutes for the story and the purpose behind what they wanted to achieve as a brand. We are continuing to see that in the approach of brands. While it is usually the men's side of a sport that gets the biggest investment from sponsors, in hockey's case, it was the women's game that took precedence when Investec came on board in 2011. The huge success of this partnership lay in the enthusiasm of the financial services company to fully activate the sponsorship with the female athletes, as Sally Mundy, the then CEO of England Hockey, explains. Yes, they gave us a pot of money, and that was very welcome. But also, we went on a journey with them around London 2012 to really try and raise the profile of the women's squad. They put the women's pictures all over London on taxis and billboards. They really helped us in terms of trying to change the perception of the game and change the image of how the women were seen. Our players love working with Investec because Investec look after them. Sadly, making the most of sponsored properties, known as activation, is a place where some sponsors of women's sport have fallen short. From my own days in sports sponsorship back in the 90s, the rule of thumb was that a sponsor should commit twice the actual price of a sponsorship to activation. If you spent £50,000 on a shirt sponsorship, you should commit a further £100,000 to maximise what you've bought. A case in point would be Tyrrell's, the premium potato crisp manufacturer who are much celebrated as the first title sponsor of the Premier 15s, the top tier of the Women's English Rugby Union Domestic League in 2017. Unfortunately, many in the sport felt they failed to maximise this relationship in terms of building the profile for the sport and the league. The relationship ended in 2020 when the contract with the RFU was not renewed for another term. Here's hoping that Allianz, announced in the autumn of 2020 as the new sponsor for the Premier 15s, will do a better job. A sponsor that has always been great at aligning themselves with women's sport and activating its properties well is Vitality, working in netball, hockey, cricket, rugby and football. Clearly, the profile and branding from the events they support is a key consideration. But Vitality's approach has been different from many brands in that it's far from a badging exercise and much more about how they can help a sport to achieve its bigger goals. Lisa Parfitt explains, Vitality started very early in netball, and they've grown with them and supported them. Fundamentally, they've been able to change the sport by funding professional contracts. The reason that the Vitality Roses play and are being paid is because of Vitality. One of the main reasons Vitality, a health and life insurance firm, has invested so much in women's sport is that it reinforces the brand's drive for gender parity, which is enhanced by the fact that it's possible to have a much larger presence in a sport or at a major event. A key part of our strategy is around ownership, says Nick Reed, Commercial Director at Vitality. Where we can own a sport or an event, that is a core constituent part of our strategy. Take the Women's Hockey World Cup in 2018. It was very ownable. This clearly wouldn't have been possible for the brand in the world of men's football, which is another sport where Vitality has a large presence, but where there are a myriad of other brands. This is a significant advantage for brands coming into women's sport right now. Businesses are also keen to understand if the audience for women's sport matches the audience they are trying to reach. It's wrong to say that women's sport is just for women, for instance. More men watch women's football than women, but there are definitely sports that do appeal to women, and for the brands that want to target women, this can be incredibly powerful. Similarly, it's often via the sponsors that change at a structural level can be made in sport. If decisions are being made within a sport that will damage the progression of women, then letting the sponsors feel the wrath of consumer opinion can be hugely powerful. After all, women make up over 50% of the population and control the majority of buying decisions in the home. So some well-directed activity on social media, especially when amplified by high-profile influencers, undoubtedly makes brands sit up and take notice. This in turn impacts the teams and organisations. Ultimately, money talks. In the early days of sports sponsorship, the chairman's whim was a phrase used to describe many decisions made about which sports an organisation supported. The chairman loves golf, so the company sponsors tournaments where he'll get to present the trophy to his heroes. He's a big rugby fan, so they sponsor the RFU and he can entertain clients at Twickenham, meet some stars and watch every game live. His wife loves tennis, so he sponsors Wimbledon and they have centre court seats for the family each year. Times have changed and sponsorship decisions are more often based on sophisticated metrics of reaching potential customers via broadcast and branding. That said, it's been interesting to see an element of the chairman's whim emerging in the past decade which might benefit women's sport. For many of the big brands backing women's sport, you'll often find the senior decision makers talk about their wives and daughters and the recognition that now is the time to invest in women's sport to ensure more equality for the next generation. It's not that these mainly male decision makers hadn't had wives and daughters in the past, but we're now living in a time when they are more conscious of being called out by females in their family for the decisions they're making, which is hugely positive. It's possible I was also very receptive to the idea because of my previous experience of women's sport. Not only do I have a daughter, but my first real exposure to big-time professional women's sport was when I worked in Germany. I went to the Women's World Cup final in 2011 in Frankfurt with my 8-year-old son. It was a real spectacle. It was end-to-end, went to penalties. We didn't leave the stadium until midnight. The atmosphere was fantastic. The game was dynamic, passionate but fun too. My son still talks about it to this day, says Kia CEO Paul Philpott. In an era of Me Too and Time's Up, businesses are also recognising the need to display better gender balance across their organisations. Where they spend their sponsorship money can have a significant impact on their staff and customers. a major corporation can no longer claim to offer gender-equal business practices only to then solely sponsor men's sport. If it wants to have a truly inclusive culture, then redressing the balance of its public-facing sponsorship activities will be key. And of course, we are also seeing increasing numbers of women on corporate boards, which in turn brings more balance to investment decision-making. Sally Horrocks, co-founder of the sports marketing agency Y Sport, explains how the conversations she is having with brands have changed. A few years ago, it might have been unusual to have included the women's game or women's sport or the reach to females in those conversations, she tells Richard Gillis on the Unofficial Partner podcast. Now, it's just absolutely par for the course, and it's expected, because the boards of those brands, against their own governance structures and their own commitments to shareholders, need to demonstrate that they are fair and even in the way they distribute their marketing funds. The importance of reaching communities is also highlighted by Sally Hancock, Sally Horrocks' co-founder, who worked with SSE when they became the sponsor of the Women's FA Cup. I think it's taken one or two savvy brands to be brave and really step up to the plate. SSE definitely led the way with that, and it's often cited. And the results of that and the impact and reach, not just at the BBC broadcast, Wembley FA Cup level, but right down to community grassroots. Other brands look at that and start to think, actually, there is a right seam of opportunity here. This is our audience. This is the community we sit in. These are our customers. It's about time we took a closer look at what we are doing and tried to make sure we are applying a more diverse approach about what we're doing now. The way in which sponsorship properties are sold is also changing, and this needs to continue for women's sport to evolve. If brands only consider historical audience figures and media coverage, then often women's events can't compete because they haven't had this exposure. Brands that are more forward-thinking, willing to be open-minded in their desire to help shape this emerging market, will see great returns on their investment, as they also help create a more equal future for society. Talking to me about new opportunities for brands ahead of the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2019, former lioness Eni Aluko said, "Since the Me Too movement, women are now seen around the world as deserving of more. More equality, bigger voice, more powerful." So from a brand perspective, harnessing the powerful women in sport to enhance their brand makes sense for where we are in the world in terms of women. Sponsoring women's sport is not just about doing it because it's the right thing to do, though. Even before the women's boat race joined the men's on the Thames in 2015, Helena Morrissey, who led Newton Asset Finance to sponsor the women's event, said, "Newton's sponsorship also made fantastic business sense, and my hope is that other companies will see this and follow suit." Even before taking account of the likely global attention around this year's historic race, the metrics used to gauge payback of Newton's sponsorship monies suggest we have already achieved at least a threefold return on our investment. As consumers, we can all play our part in this area by showing support for the brands that back women's sport. From the products we buy in supermarkets to where we bank, from the insurance policies we buy to the cars we choose, we can all make buying decisions that reward the brands who have thrown their collective weight behind women's sport. Another route to income for some sports is the sale of broadcasting rights. In the UK, the commercialisation of TV rights has been the foundation for the growth of the Premier League. Its income has rocketed alongside the desire of fans worldwide to follow their favourite clubs and players. Broadcasters compete to become the official rights holder of the competition, and the enormous fees paid are then distributed across the Premier League clubs. Back in 1997, the rights were sold to Sky for £670 million. The rights to show Premier League games from 2019 to 2022 were sold for £4.4 billion, amid speculation that new organisations might begin to enter the bidding, including the likes of Amazon, Facebook, Netflix and Twitter. The way in which the rights to women's sports are being sold has changed in recent years. In the past, it was very common to sell the rights to the men's team or league to a sponsor and then tag on the women's too, ensuring they received a small proportion of the funding. At a time when there was little demand for women's sport, this felt like a fair way to ensure women got some of the pie, and it also enabled the commercial team to enhance the sponsor's package. What we are now seeing is the unbundling of these rights, selling the women's sport as a standalone entity. Many would say the huge success the FA have had in attracting sponsorship for the women's game is because they unbundled it from the men's. As Heather Abatz, chair of the Women's Sport Group, explains, what's important for women's football is that it has its own appointment to view. It's not just seen as an intro act for male football, it actually stands by itself and has proven its value. Selling women's sport in this way not only means more access to funding, but gives brands the opportunity to shape the relationship with women's sport and the messaging around it. When we talk about unbundling, it is about selling women's football, selling women's cricket, selling women's rugby. They are different sporting experiences. Of course, if you love rugby, you might well love women's rugby and men's rugby, or you might be somebody who just loves women's rugby, or somebody who just loves women's football. This is an opportunity to put women's sport properly and squarely in the front window where it belongs, says Heather. The FA has had much success in selling the rights to the WSL from 2021. And although the numbers are a tiny fraction of the income generated for the Premier League, it will make a significant difference to the women's game. Other sports, like rugby, are also unbundling the rights to the women's element, with the Women's Six Nations looking for a new broadcaster and sponsors when the England women's relationship with Sky comes to an end. In 2020, the agency CSM was appointed to source new commercial partners for the competition. World Rugby, too, have been inspired by the success of federations such as UEFA and the FA, and in 2020 unbundled the women's rights. As Katie Salier, General Manager of Women's Rugby at World Rugby, explained to me, it's not enough to be growing the percentage of investment into women's rugby from the World Rugby pie. It was important to grow the whole pie. If all we were doing was robbing Peter to pay Paul, then we weren't actually getting significant gains in terms of standing on our own feet, saying women's sport is important. We developed a separate commercial strategy. We did an analysis of what was going on in the unions around the world to see where they were at with their own commercial strategies, and we decided to unbundle the commercial rights for women and men. Most international federations did as we did in the past. When they sell the rights for their Men's World Cup, they also throw in the rights for the Women's World Cup and some of the other events as well. It's not saying in any way that the sponsors who had been given the women's rights weren't passionate about women's rugby, but the internal cash flow didn't materialise, and we weren't seeing the activation to the same extent. World Rugby are now in the market seeking 6 global partners for women's rugby over the next 6 years to include the next 2 World Cups. I wish them well. For many women's sports, it's not just a matter of selling your rights, but hoping that a TV channel will cover your sport at all. Despite not having a male equivalent sport to hang on to the coattails of, in the words of former CEO Joe Coates, née Adams, England netball did a great job in this area. In 2005, they teamed up with Sky and invested their own money in the production costs for Super League games to show there was an audience. The national governing body effectively paid to get itself on TV, a brave move for any sport. When they renegotiated in 2013, Sky agreed to pay for production, but took some of the commercial rights in exchange. By 2016, England Netball had its commercial rights back, and the shows were fully produced by Sky with high-quality production, graphics and analysis. As the audience for women's rugby increases, this is certainly an approach that rugby could take. Last year, I watched the most amazing game as Harlequins women played their long-time rivals Saracens at home at the Twickenham Stoop. The game entered its final thrilling moments. Saracens had staged a remarkable comeback from being 24-7 down at half-time to now being ahead 27-33. And Harlequins were desperately close to scoring in the 80th minute with a huge push around their goal line. I sat on the edge of my seat, my hand covering my mouth, in a mix of excitement and dread. Harlequins were a client at the time. I remember my overriding thought at the end of the afternoon was that I had been lucky enough to be present at one of the most astonishing and gripping games of rugby I had ever seen. That it was only witnessed by a crowd of a few thousand and those able to watch on England Rugby's live stream. If only that wonderful match had been broadcast more widely, reaching a mass audience on mainstream TV, what a superb advert it would have been for the women's game. Here's hoping, with a new sponsor for the Premier 15s, we might see a shrewd broadcaster step forward too. A final observation is the presence of investors in men's professional sport. Look at the ownership of the biggest football and rugby clubs and, along with a few investment groups, you'll primarily see male millionaires and billionaires with vast sums to spend on a sport they love. It's the same across the world. Women's sport hasn't historically appealed to those wealthy men, and if we were hoping that female billionaires might redress the balance, unfortunately that's less likely when for every female billionaire there are 8.4 male billionaires. Of course there are male owners who appreciate the value in women's sport. I asked Emma Hayes, the Chelsea manager, about this, and she told me, "In my opinion, the women's game has a debt of gratitude to Roman Abramovich. Because from the off, he has always been really interested in it. He loves the team. He's such a big Chelsea fan as well as an owner, and that is hugely influential. For some women's clubs, where they find investment is a matter of principle. Lewes FC has a funding model that sees over 1,600 small owners investing in the club. I'm a proud Lewes FC owner myself." I asked Maggie Murphy, General Manager at Lewes FC Women, if the club's hugely ethical stance on all things would make it difficult to take investment from a billionaire businessman waltzing in with a huge cheque to transform the club. She was pretty forthright in her response. "If there are some shady billionaires out there that want to give us money, you're not welcome. Of course I need more money. We have so much more ambition, so much potential, and we know that we need money to take us to that next level, but we are only going to take good people's money, and we are not going to compromise our values, because then we have not achieved anything. The hypocrisy would be terrible." In 2020, it was wonderful to witness the arrival of Angel City, the majority female-founded Los Angeles NWSL club, which is backed by A-list celebrities such as Eva Longoria, Jennifer Garner, Natalie Portman, Serena Williams, and her 2-year-old daughter, Alexis Ohanian Jr., along with former US women's national team players Julie Foudy, Mia Hamm, and Abby Wambach. The new franchise, which launches in spring 2022, says it wants to write a new playbook and think differently about ownership, ticketing, partnerships, and community collaboration. It was also announced in January 2021 that 23-year-old Naomi Osaka, Forbes' highest paid female athlete in 2020, had invested in another NWSL franchise, North Carolina Courage. Osaka commented that she admired everything that Courage does for diversity and equality in the community. Here's hoping these moves might mark the beginning of more women investing in female sport. Thank you so much for listening to the serialisation of my book Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. If you'd like a copy, it's available in hardback and paperback in all good bookshops and online. The Game Changers podcast is free to listen to on all podcast platforms. Head over to fearlesswomen.co.uk to find out more about all of the incredible game changers I've spoken to in previous series. There are over 100 of them, including elite athletes, journalists, coaches, scientists, broadcasters and CEOs. As well as listening to all the episodes on the website, you can find out more about the Women's Sport Collective, a free, inclusive network for all women working in sport. And you can register for the Fearless Women newsletter, a weekly review of the global developments in women's sport. Do come and say hello on social media, where you'll find me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Twitter at Sue Anstiss. Finally, if you've enjoyed the podcast, I'd be so grateful if you could do two things. Firstly, if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I'd really appreciate it. And secondly, if there's anyone in your life, at home or at work, who you think might enjoy the podcast, please do let them know about it and help us spread the word about women's sport and the stories of these incredible game changers.